Questions? Fasting's pretty straightforward. Is there any?
There have been some students at my school who, during Ramadan, even though they may have been sick and should have been drinking fluids, didn't drink.
Muslims, you'll generally find, are pretty rigid about that. And that has to do sometimes with not fully understanding the tradition, because if you're diabetic, it's actually prohibited to fast. If a physician thinks that it's harmful, it is prohibited by Sharia, and you would actually be doing something haram in the teaching. You would be doing something prohibited. Because preservation of the self is the second, after preservation of religion, it is the second highest priority in the Sharia.
Can you look at the categories of those that are exempt, other than you said diabetics?
Old people, if it's difficult for them. If they're able to, but it's hard, they have a choice. People who are traveling have a choice, but if it's hard, they're encouraged to break it. And if it's extremely hard, undue, then they have to break it. A pregnant woman, a nursing woman, and she can either decide for herself or get a doctor's opinion. And the doctor's opinion would be binding on her. Anyone who has a physical illness, like diabetes, or they have to take medicines regularly throughout the day. Now some scholars have permitted like asthma inhalants, that does not break the fast. There's a difference of opinion about that, but my Shaykh gave a religious opinion that it did not break the fast, because it went into the lungs. And smoking broke the fast because it was unnecessary. Right? Which a smoker would definitely disagree with that.
Soldiers, right?
What's that?
Soldiers.
Good point. Yeah. Somebody who was fighting, and they needed their physical strength. Now, Hakim Alijawan, it was kind of became national news because he was fasting during the playoffs. And, it would be prohibited really for him to do that, to break his fast. Because it's a sport.
Right.
That's why. If it was a valid job, like it is permissible, for instance, if there was a harvest that had to be done and they could not do it fasting and they would lose the crop or something like that because of that, some type of situation like that, then it would be actually permissible to do it.
What are the hours of fast?
Fasting goes from the Fajr prayer, which is dawn, until the sunset prayer. And then you can eat, sleep, you do sleep in the daytime anyway, but you can eat, drink, and have relations with your husband or your wife. It's during the nighttime.
What about getting married?
During Ramadan?
During Ramadan.
You could. Absolutely. Prophet got married in Ramadan. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ramadan predates Islam.
The month predates Islam, not the fasting. But the lunar months of Islam predated Islam. What predates Islam is the rites around the Kaaba.
During Ramadan?
No. Ramadan does not predate Islam. Fasting in Ramadan is second year Hijrah. Before that, the Arabs did not fast. And the Quran says, fasting has been prescribed upon you just as it was prescribed upon the people before you, in order that you might learn discipline. So it's actually considered a spiritual practice to discipline yourself. Now if you think about it, people who abstain from for a whole month of not eating during the daylight hours, it gives the body, there is a very strong discipline that goes with that. It's prohibited to backbite at any time. Whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim, you are not supposed to talk bad about people. It is prohibited to lie. It's disencouraged to talk a lot, empty talk in Islam. It's just not something encouraged. There's a tradition, the Prophet said, كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ الْقِيلَ وَالْقَالَ. Allah dislikes empty gossip. Thoreau said that gossip was good in homeopathic doses.
To head back to a question I'd forgotten earlier, you said if there were a legitimate Muslim government, then zakat could be applied. And I know that a lot of Muslims think there is not. but there are governments that claim they are,
Right.
correct? Have any of the current governments that claim to be Muslim governments started to collect?
There's zakat. There's some zakat, absolutely, in the Emirates, in Arabia, in different places. They do have zakat, and people can pay it through government.
Can or not?
No, they don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But with a legitimate Islamic government, it would be allowed for that government
To do it.
require,
Yes. Yeah.
to require.
Mhm.
Okay. But nowhere requires it currently.
No.
Okay.
Could you explain that why Ramadan? Is it when the angel Gabriel
Okay, good point. Thank you. Yeah. It's
revealed?
It's Ramadan. The reason Ramadan is the month of fasting is generally it says that this Quran was revealed in a blessed time. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. Now, the Muslim belief is that the Quran came to the first heaven, which is called Sama'ud Dunya, to a place called Baytul Izzah, the abode of dignity or exaltation. And then that happened in Ramadan. And the beginning of the revelation began on the 27th of Ramadan. And then over a 23-year period, it is being revealed to the Prophet. And in Ramadan specifically, the Prophet ﷺ said that Jibreel used to go through the Quran every month with him, but in Ramadan, he used to go through it every year with him in Ramadan, the entire Quran. And then in the last Ramadan of his life, he went through it 2 times, and he knew that was his last year. So the Ramadan is considered a very blessed time for Muslims. And traditionally, it's encouraged for people to go out and see the new moon. And the Muslims traditionally went out, sighted the new moon, and you would hear a lot of shouts of joy, Allahu Akbar, in the Muslim cities that go up on the rooftops and things. Mm-hmm.
Is there therefore a connection between the crescent and the star?
The crescent moon, interestingly enough, is a much later. It was the Mamluks that actually introduced the crescent moon. And I think it actually, it was a symbol of some of the ancient moon cults. It's become to be adopted as a symbol, but it's in no way an authoritative symbol of Islam. Muslims, it's like an urf, what they call a custom. And the Prophet said whatever the Muslims see as good is good with Allah. So there's an idea that the crescent moon has kind of been accepted by the Muslims but it's not from the Prophet Muhammad. It's an interesting thing about Islam is the absence of symbols. Like icons and things. There really is. You go into a mosque and calligraphy is pretty much, and then you have a lot of geometric, which is later. But there's just an absence of a type of iconography or something like that. Mm-hmm.
I've heard it said that the Shahada is a symbol for Islam, written on. Somebody said that.
It's traditionally the Prophet did put it on his flag, and so it traditionally has been like. But again, when I mean symbol, I mean more like an abstract, not so much language. Language is symbols, obviously, but I mean like a cross or the Star of David or the Om Simbu statues. In traditions you have a lot of symbols. Like Hindu tradition has many symbols. The Christians have the Stations of the Cross. In a lot of Catholic churches, you'll see those type things. So finally, Hajj. Now, just about the fasting, I would say that traditionally the Muslims viewed fasting as a time of discipline. You should control your talk, your speech, not talk a lot. Learn to control the sexual appetite. Learn to control the tongue. It was very important. The Prophet said in a tradition, whoever guarantees for me what's between his 2 jaws and his 2 thighs, I guarantee him paradise. In other words, if you could break those 2 desires and really discipline yourself in those 2 things, then, and it's interesting the symbolic relationship between the mouth and the genitals. It's fascinating. There's been a lot of traditions that have examined that. The idea of the createdness, that the mouth is like a womb and the tongue is like, a male organ, that there's a type of, that language is a type of created, it's an aspect of creativity. There's an impregnation that takes place from the mind of thought that emerges in the child of speech and things like that. So there's some fascinating relationships there. Let's see. Hajj.